Right. Excuse me. Now, what I want to do is I wrote an article. This is what I do a lot of the time. My name's Dennis Hall, and I write these articles, and they're mostly political. And this is one that I think I did a good job of. I try and do a good job of all of them, of course, but I thought I would just see what would happen. I kind of thought I would read this out. And so I've got to remember that the thing's going. So here we are, we're on deck. And over here I've got a laptop, and I've got this article on it. And what I've called it is the creeping cancer of modern Western-style communism in New Zealand. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read it out, but I can't help myself. I'll probably interrupt it from time to time because since I wrote it, I always feel as though I can edit it as I go. Because when I write these things, I usually write them out in about 20 minutes, half an hour, and then spend 5 or 6 hours editing them and getting them in the shape that I want. And so I always find new things that need to be done to them. Anyway, the name of this was The Creeping Cancer of Modern Western-Style Communism in New Zealand. So, and I've said, in the first sentence, I've said, might be a good idea to copy and paste this and save it, because as soon as they spot it, Facebook will remove it. Well, as it happens, I don't think they have yet. What do you know? And so change might have a different mouse, Dennis, because this one's not going to work on my laptop. So here we go. So I started off by saying, when you or your friends call Jacinda Arden a communist, as some people do, and you just think it's no big deal, no more than an appellation someone has spoken to express an idea or maybe annoy her, well, you need to think again and understand something. She's not angry or put out by that because she knows you are right. She is a communist. And it makes her smile because she also knows that although you say it out loud, you most likely don't really believe it. It's a kind of a thing if you think about it. And I've said here, it's just a bit like calling her arrogant, isn't it? I reject the premise of the question. Well, lady, reject the premise of this little essay to follow. I think you need to start believing it because if you look at this with your eyes open about the history of global communism like I do or I have, you might be more than convinced that it's true. I have a feeling that Jacinda Ardern could have covert aspirations to be the leader of world communism. Yeah, and I'll define that. I mean, leader of world communism in the West that are to all intents and purposes not communism, if you get my drift, rather than, I don't know, Putin who might be, or President Xi who might be the leaders of world communism, where communism is really based. And I think and I have a feeling that she's on the verge of leading New Zealand into a new governmental co-governance configuration. Now that's because of their language, the language that they use, and all about co-governance configuration, where the non-communist majority in New Zealand lose all power to a very militant and race-specific minority that finds its cloak of invisibility in its unarguable pushback excuses and its get-out-of-trouble clause in never-ending accusations of the most heinous crime of all, racist or racism. Now, that heinous crime of being called a racist or whatever is a unique Western European syndrome. We do that. We're probably the only ones in the world who do it. Everybody, because we call ourselves racist all the time, the rest of the world think we're racist as well. I mean, all they're doing is agreeing with us because most of this nonsense comes from us. And at the same time, our countries sort of make space for other races within its midst. Other races don't make space for us in their midst. They just don't. It's only us. It's only us that are that stupid. And the other thing, and the reason why I say stupid, is because that is all a reality, but we're afraid to debate it. I'll go on. Would the World Communist Bloc consider that a reasonable tactic for taking over an otherwise prosperous and peaceful nation of well-ordered people oriented to the world's family of democratic nations, which is what New Zealand is? It's not oriented to China or Vietnam, but that's what Jacinda wants to do with us. Of course, and so I've said, of course, I shouldn't interrupt so much. It is much less noisy and doesn't kill as many people as guns. And they won't want to scare the neighbours, especially the Pacific Islands, and then Australia, Japan and Canada, etc. What I'm talking about is, taking people, communism taking over without guns. I sense that she, Jacinda Ardern, senses a future where she and her cohorts of parliamentary actors and activists, actually modern-style racist subversives elected to Parliament on a web of lies, I'll tell you the lie in a minute, will lead the world by taking us, as the first world nation, back into the ambit of what is left of the old communist bloc. I think that's what she wants to try and do. And to call them parliamentary actors, I think they are acting. I think they're trying to pretend and not make people, not let too many people realise what they actually are. And the web of lies, simple lies, a very simple lie. The lie is that Europeans came to New Zealand and deprived Maori of an idyllic existence as noble savages living in a country without civilization. That's friggin' nonsense. Maoris were eating each other and living in stockade villages. They're living in fortified villages. Why were they doing that? Because they were constantly involved in tribal wars. Nothing idyllic about that. Any academic who wants to pretend that was idyllic is just nuts. But I don't expect any more from academics, basically, because they kind of learn stuff in a bubble. Yeah, they do. So, dear fellow New Zealanders, as gullible as you may have proved yourselves to be, go back and look again at the famous YouTube clip, which I've attached to the bottom of this, of Jacinda Ardern giving the keynote address as the president of the World Socialist Youth Convention, or whatever the fuck they called it, where she calls for the support of the comrades at least a dozen times to unite and gouge away under the skin of the Western nations like an infection of political venom. Injection, maybe it should be, and defeat the West using its own democratic institutions, which as soon as they succeed will be abolished. That's what communists do. As soon as they use our institutions to undermine us, they will abolish them. Think they won't? They're already trying to do it now. When asked about this now, this is that socialist convention, comrades thing, she just flings up out and says, "Oh, but I was so young then," and with a grumpy face that she is so good at, Jesus, she makes some great grumpy faces, I've got pictures of some of them, she dismisses the question with a flick of the head. But we who are looking, we who have our eyes open, we all know in our heart of hearts that communism never sleeps. It's like rust. It never sleeps. Communism and all its manifestations understand and believe in the long game. And the long game is now in process of giving communism a new 21st century face or spin and in making it acceptable to the Western mindset. It's because the Western mindset is, the basic philosophy is be open-minded, and that includes communism. She has put on the lipstick and the rouge of the self-satisfied masses in the successful and peaceful West. Academics and advertising people and broadcasting people, they will all, they've sort of pushed the idea of making sure that everybody gets a say, and they will defend communism no matter what. And, because they think that's the right thing to do. If people are full of shit. And so she has put on the lipstick and the rouge of the self-satisfied masses in the successful and peaceful West, and is flying the disguised communist banner of respectability in the most peaceful nation of them all, New Zealand, and is recreating and reinventing communism's public face as we speak. And in your midst, And even as you see it happening before your very eyes, you refuse to see it because it looks so bloody benign. Just because it's got lipstick on and it's combed its hair and a big white smile, the result of Western dentistry, doesn't mean it's real. Jacinda knows that if she succeeds in subverting New Zealand to the global communist program, she will become their poster queen on the global stage. Because if anything will get the attention of the Western world at large, it will be a relatively peaceful communist takeover in New Zealand. And I couldn't help but notice that she has already started fomenting trouble in Canada over trade and gotten us banned from their otherwise global dairy market. And what will her mate, the ever-creepy Justin Trudeau, have to say about that or think about that? Who cares? In the great communist ideal, he will be absolutely disposable. Maybe he's a communist as well, who knows? It's pretty debatable. Of course they know, those communist bosses somewhere, that'll be China and Russia, basically. And in places in the West where they sort of spend, their time and effort trying to propagate communism. But, comrades, keep it low-key. This is what they would be saying. Comrades, keep it low-key, low profile. No boasting in the world's press yet. We're not quite there yet because the New Zealanders haven't given up quite enough of their freedom yet. But they will. But have patience. The last bits of legislation will be in place in the next couple of weeks as pathetic New Zealand public think about Christmas, scratch their asses, grunt in anticipation, have another beer. Oh, God, lost my place. We all know that Kiwis are classically acquiescent, so passive and docile, and have been so totally blinded by paid-up and controlled news media that have already been taken over, and it has capitulated and surrendered balanced journalism in favour of our Communist Party line. But we don't call it that, of course. Anybody in New Zealand who takes the trouble to go and look at TV1 News, and you need to look at it for a week, but you'll get it, it has been taken over by the communists and also by the sort of indigenous the idea of a classic, wonderful indigenous life, which, of course, is bollocks. The indigenous life as it is today completely depends on Western civilization. But the model that they're using is the bullshit model of what life was like before we came. You'll get it. When you grow up, you'll get it. Look back at the history of nations. That governmental takeover of media is an essential move by any aspiring communist leader in government. Look it up. TVNZ and TV3 and Radio New Zealand all have been reconfigured as state media, now deliver nothing but the leftist government message, sugar-coated here and there, but always entirely communist, masqueraded as cultural and indigenous. Yes, indigenous. What a great way to hide it. We wonder who thought of that. The government is so confident now that they ignore the obvious disquiet in the population about this, and you Kiwis are already used to it. You are so pathetic. They know, you're too dumb to see it. That is a typical Kiwi cop-out. And then there's the iwi takeover of the health system, entirely the creation of the population at large. The takeover of the water entities, also entirely the creation of the population at large. The takeover of the education system. Maori didn't have an education system. It's entirely the creation of the population at large. Almost all the broadcasting system, good God, also entirely the creation of the population at large. Maori didn't create all those things, and the idea that they've got more expertise to offer those things is just ludicrous in the extreme. It is entirely ideological. And if you people stand back and allow it to happen, you're nuts. For your family's sake, I said here, now new language laws. Language laws. What will that mean? And curtailed free speech. What is it that non-communists? What is it that is non-communist about all that? And there's more, of course. For your family's sake, listen to what I'm trying to tell you. The communists always call themselves something else and resolutely play the long game and just take as much as they can get without military-style violence and never give anything anywhere back. They do not care if that means dividing it up, because when the going gets tough, they just withdraw to their slightly enlarged sphere of influence and keep pushing, and wear them, as in us, slowly down. Look what happened to Korea, now South Korea and North Korea, and look at the astonishing difference. I mean, it's there plain to be seen even to an idiot. So, idiots can't have a look. North Korea has become a virtual communist prison for all but its elite. What is it you don't get about that, you dumb bastards? And if we take the trouble to have a look, we can see the parallels of a developing North Korean-style elite here in New Zealand. Call it iwi power, why don't you? It's got to reside somewhere, that lunacy. That could be Jacinda's model for us. She knows that if she gets militant people like that on her side, they'll go communist, all right? Yeah, and a lot of them have already gone. The Americans went to Marxism. Marxism probably more palatable than communism. The Americans went and sacrificed thousands of lives of their own youth to protect and defend Koreans from communism. Well, they did. And in the end, the huge country was forced to surrender to the communists in the north because they never give up and will sacrifice lives endlessly to get their way, at all at a cost of billions to defend just the south. And there it remains, with a great wall across the entire Korean peninsula. Communism and freedom are incompatible with each other. And I've said here, well, at least we won't need a war because we've got Cook Strait. That's provided that all the good people move to the South Island, I suppose. Why the nation? And because, the lunacy is mostly in the north, no doubt about that. Where the universities are. Universities, they're just, Why the nation and the people? Why the nation and people dividing wall, you ask? There and in Berlin and other places. And it's because the communists never give up. And they never give back. And they know better than us that communism cannot survive in close proximity with freedom. And they know that freedom of speech and individuality is what you are losing every day to the communists in your midst, otherwise known as Labour Green. The Greens, forget about the Greens and plants. Not plants. Plants is just an excuse. It's just they're a Marxist organisation. You dumb bastards. You need to see it. A lot of the dummies who are in the Greens don't even see it because they're thick as pig shit. I've known some of them. Dumb as dirt. Think about the new elite and how it has developed. Think about the new elite and how it has developed and the astonishing riches it has acquired by threat and deception. I'm talking about the Maori new elite and government assistance. And then think about the dynamic that supports and protects it from whatever unacceptable behaviours that it displays. The great cloak of invisibility enshrouded in the accusations of racism. As soon as they call you a racist, you run away, you dumb shits. We made the weapon, we provided it, and they shoot us with it all the time. The other aid to their astonishing cloak of invisibility while they pass all these draconian laws has been the virus. I mean, they've just marched ahead during the virus and the vaccine, inadvertently but without a doubt aided by the anti-vax movement, whose activities have taken the attention of otherwise busy observers of dangerous and subversive government behaviours. People have been focusing on the vaccine and the virus and have not noticed, and that's obscured the rise of communism. So, hey people, get your head around this. The virus will go away, but the communism that is coming in behind it will be a permanent feature because basically there's no vaccine against communism except common sense, because it will make laws to protect itself. That is why China is a capitalist country with a communist government. You'll get it. Enough, Dennis. If you haven't convinced the silly buggers yet, you never will. Thanks.